Okay, let me do a quick emergency update. I haven't commented on the news. We have the Colossians, conclusion of Colossians post coming up in maybe Thursday. I'll post it. And the continuing, there's so many good stories with my friends. Let me share this one. Off the cuff the other day, one of my homeless friends, Albert Hoffman, he just mentioned, I like those Cheeto cheese doodles, which I know most of you know what those are. And I was just shopping at HEB yesterday, and I saw a bag of them, like on sale. So I'm going to get that for Albert. Now it's like $2. And then I was riding around, I said, I got to give this bag to Albert. I'll know. And I was going to catch his response on video, but I didn't do it because I thought, well, if I make a video, I'm going to talk on news issues, and then I try to separate that one. But I didn't do any yesterday. So I seen him. I had to ride around a little because he was sitting at the bus stop on Waldron. I sat with him for about 30 minutes, maybe an hour. But right away I said, I got something for you. Oh, yeah. He said, I'm going to save these, John, and eat them later. I said, that's fine. So, okay, I'll eat some now. I think he just ate a few because he thought, oh, John just gave them to me. And either way, but it made him happy. And you say, John, you just lost your reward. My reward was to see him happy. And if the return was a $2 blessing, I'd give that return up, okay? And then I had good fellowship. Look, a lot of my friends on their journey. Now, this is a news update. I wasn't going to do one just on the world news. The top story today is the Mueller investigation once again leaked. Somebody within the office leaked to the New York Times, I think, about 40 questions that they want to ask Mr. Trump. And this is how I know at this stage you're going after the removal of a president for things that other presidents committed much more serious crimes. And I've covered a lot of them because, let me get into that and then we'll do the colder times. The questions seem to say that Bob Mueller, because they could not find Russian collusion, that he's seeking possibly an indictment on what's called obstruction of justice. Now, there are many legal scholars, Mr. Dershowitz and many others, who say you really cannot charge a sitting president with obstruction of justice because a sitting U.S. president, one of his few executive powers is people that are in these offices. The firing of Mr. Comey is what they're looking at, which he himself committed crimes in order to get Mr. Mueller to be in the position he's in. Mr. Comey has admitted that before Congress. And when he admitted that, he also admitted a crime. He said, I took my personal memos of meetings with Mr. Trump. I leaked them to a Columbia University, I believe, law professor who is a friend of mine. And he, quote, leaked them to the New York Times for the purpose of getting a special counsel. If Mr. Comey, when he was FBI director, felt that there were certain crimes that rose to the level of getting a special counsel, what you would then do as FBI director, you would then coordinate with the Justice Department and say, I, as the FBI director, found crimes that the president has committed. He did that out of a retaliation that he got fired, because now after his book came out, we see how petty Mr. Comey was. Okay. Now Mr. Mueller seems to be seeking a possible indictment and criminal charges against a sitting president for firing Comey. And as a news watcher, Mr. Trump, when he openly said, because he's not real politically savvy, he believed that the Russia investigation, remember this, if you know you did no wrongdoing, which now we know he did not collude, not even a percentage of like the dossier and Democrats colluded, But he believed that the Russia thing, which I do believe at this point, was becoming a huge distraction. And at that point, he believed that Mr. Comey should have been fired. And he also had a particular recommendation from Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, also that Comey wasn't up to the job because of the Hillary thing. Now, I know he didn't fire her because of his handling of the Hillary thing, but he had enough. And so Trump said, look, it's getting in the way, plus I got this other man at the... So he fired him. Now, if Mueller is looking at that, Mueller should just immediately wrap it up. But that's not how he is, because he has a history. They kept a lot of people in prison when they set up a lot of those Italian brothers of mine, when Mr. Mueller was in charge of the Whitey Bulger thing. And he knew. He kept a couple of, quote, mafia Italian guys who were innocent. Kept them in prison for 30 years. 2 of them died. 2 of them were released. And the U.S. government settled for millions and millions and millions of dollars. And Mueller knew that he was corrupting that. That's the Whitey Bulger investigation. I looked at that. So it shows me that at this stage, forget obstruction of justice. Because Trump admitted, not I got to get rid of him because I have collusion with Russia. No, because this whole thing is messing up the country. And so, and you say, how are those lesser crimes than former presidents? Just, I'll give you one. When the Eric Holder Justice Department, under Mr. Obama, illegally targeted Cheryl Atkinson, a mainstream news reporter, illegally went into her computers, and they did other things. That rises so much to a level higher than this. Because when you use the Justice Department of Eric Holder to personally target, and they did that on more than one occasion. So when you use those powers in that way, now the Kohler Times. The Kohler Times, I had a little sense. I criticized them for their high praise of Mr. Gonzales, our new DA, but then I had a sense that they were a little mad or offended at Mr. Gonzales because he bypasses regular media and goes right to Facebook. Now, I have never watched Mark Gonzales's communication to the public through Facebook, but I think you're doing right on that. And I think the Kohler Times possibly, and other media outlets possibly, wanted to go to Mark Gonzales for responses of things that they've critiqued him on. And he probably has said, I'm bypassing it. Because, look, he's a younger DA. And the younger generation is not going through the standard norms of media. And I felt like they might also be a little peeved at him for that. And this particular article I just read right now showed me that. Mark Gonzales instituted the new district attorney, now in office for a while. He instituted a particular wanted to work with domestic violence cases, wanted to be more progressive, okay? And he came in, he was a famed defense lawyer. And, well, then the Kohler Times did a critical thing of him, rightfully so, because the only 2 cases that the, quote, pretrial diversion worked on were applied to was one which was a Mathis officer, Mathis cop who should no longer be a cop because he choked out his girlfriend maybe multiple times. And Mr. Gonzales, they offered him that pretrial diversion thing, and it shouldn't have been offered for that because rightfully Kohler Times pointed out that's a felony thing. It's not a misdemeanor domestic violence. And then the other one was a former Hooks player, one of the Class B baseball teams, which is a fine team, Hooks out of Corpus Christi. They saw him on video beating up his girlfriend, if you will. And so those cases, that one made national attention. Well, then what Mark Gonzales did was he repented and said, my office has failed. But he doesn't do it through the Kohler Times. He's doing it like he should through social media. And then as I read this article, I could tell. I forget what thing I saw. It's today's Kohler Times online. But they also said, now we are going to show you Mark Gonzales's failure in his admission of failure. Now I read it twice. I said, wait a minute. You got him to rightfully recognize that the pretrial diversion was not working. Then he said, I'm going to respond to the community. We're going to be tougher. We're going to just make sure violent offenders are going to get punished, which is really the job of the DA. His job really isn't what they're putting on him. The Kohler Times now says, in his admission of failure, he failed again. And then they mentioned something about social media, and then he went to social media. I believe they're upset that he's bypassing, which is the right thing to do. They're upset that people like me or Mark Gonzales or anybody have the capability to not write a letter and hope it gets printed in the Kohler Times or published. I have a friend who writes letters. No, we don't need the opinion page of the Kohler Times to speak out. We have all these avenues. And so this is the failure. Again, they're saying that Mark Gonzales failed in his admission of failure. They're saying he basically did not coordinate with a few of the local agencies, including the police chief, Sheriff Kalin. They said he should bring these people in. There's a shelter here. I've taken ladies to this shelter over the years. It's now called the Purple Door. It's the women's shelter of South Texas. And many years ago, I took a few people there that had to go there. And the Kohler Times critique is this. Mark Gonzales, and the Kohler Times did not break that story. This was KZTV that broke it. That the local woman that runs up the women's shelter for domestic violence victims, she said Mr. Gonzales' office never contacted her about now his next step of what he's going to do. And then they're mad, the Kohler Times, that he's bypassing them. And they said what Mr. Gonzales should now do is he should have coordinated with the police chief, Sheriff Kalin. Here's the mistake the Kohler Times is making. Mark Gonzales has now got a tough job, which he acknowledged. He says it's really a full-time. And as the chief prosecutor in our county, the district attorney, it really isn't his job to coordinate with the CCP. They coordinate, yes, but it's not really the job of CCPD or Sheriff Kalin or to try to. It's their job in each entity to deal righteously and justly. If you are a DA, your role has changed. You want to treat both, you want to advocate for the victims, and you want to file charges justly and righteously against offenders. And yes, you want to try to maybe implement programs that would help. But what Mr. Gonzales did when the Kohler Times initially critiqued him, he said, I'm responding to the community. And the Kohler Times is really wants you to know, we made Gonzales respond. And then they say in this article, this is today's opinion piece, they say, and now, like the community and everyone should join with us, and the Kohler Times, you are one entity. And your entity is very unreliable, and it's very biased, which we've covered. So the job of Mark Gonzales, he said, now that I'm going to respond to the community's complaints, he said, I'm going to make sure I crack down. I prosecute domestic violence cases, we get convictions and so forth. That is indeed his job. The Kohler Times is saying, well, you should work together, Mr. Gonzales. Sort of like they're putting the burden on him to coordinate all the other offices. And look, work with the Purple Door, work with the domestic violence, but that's not the man's job. Okay? It's his job to do just and right. It's his job to make sure prosecutors, when they bring cases, not like the former district attorney, Mark Skirka, there was illegality for years in that man's court. So, Mr. Gonzales, I'm glad he responded, but the Kohler Times is taking too much credit. And now to say today, we are glad he acknowledged his failure. And now we're going to show you another failure in his admission of failure. No, no, that's your failure. So we'll throw that out today as a little news update. Mr. Mueller thing, you're going after obstruction? No, that's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. There's a whole bunch of things that would rise to obstruction. Meaning, if they found out that Trump really did the collusion, and then he fired, but now at this stage we know he didn't. Besides, it's even a legal question whether or not they have trained there. One of the things about media, if all you do, I do a lot of work. I was doing some teaching earlier today. I've been up for quite some time, but then I have to be out with people. But a lot of media talking heads, if all you're sitting is behind your desk, which most reporters and all they do on the scene reporting, I get that. But then what you do is you're trying to look for things to engage and say, we want to do what's right and we want to do social justice. But if you are disconnected from the real plight, then you will hone in on certain things and you'll magnify them too much. There's a whole lot of other things besides, you've done enough, Mr. Gonzales is just going to try to do his best now, Mark Gonzales, to get some prosecutions. And he can't coordinate it. Works in hand. But they're caught up in that because they got a response out of him. But then they're upset because he didn't. I'm sure they've asked him if he wants to speak to them. No, he's doing it right. He's going to Facebook. So I'm not sure what I'll title this. This is the first update for today. But if you engage on the ground, somewhat, not just behind the desk, then you'll see things in a better perspective. Okay? All right. God bless everybody.